In the last few episodes, we've focused on what can be done to bridge the differences in a polarized society. We talked about reinvigorating the so called third places. We discussed how art can help lead to acts of disruptive kindness. Today, let's do reconciliation. Can old friendships torn apart by political conflict ever break bread peacefully again? We sit down with an indispensable master artist who is exploring this and similar themes in his very public art. Good evening. I'm John Nery, and you are in the public square. The acclaimed playwright and director Floyd Quintos has written and staged yet another must-view play, another artful provocation. After 2019's The Kundiman Party comes The Reconciliation Dinner, a powerful, painfully real dramatization of an internal conflict driving Filipinos apart. How do families and old friends who chose different sides in politics, between Duterte and Marcos on the one hand and Robredo on the other, come together again? Or have their battles changed them forever? I am delighted to say that Floyd Quintos is with us tonight. Welcome, Floyd, and thank you for joining us in the public square.
Good evening, John. Hello. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Let me begin by asking something that we raised in the previous episode. Do you believe that art can change social behavior?
It's wonderful to believe that, John. Unfortunately, the art that I'm engaged in, the theater, reaches barely 10% of our population. So I don't think, honestly, that you can really say that we affect behavior in any way. Maybe of the very few people who come to watch, and that's by the word few, by saying few, I mean in relation to all the other genres, to all the other platforms, to all the other media. I'm often asked, at least with the last two plays I've written, Kundiman Party and Reconciliation Dinner, I've often been asked, why are you talking about the upper middle class? Why aren't you talking about C, D, E? Or it's because I think I should be writing for people who patronize the theater. I should be writing for people to whom Philippine theater reaches out, and that's basically the middle class. Now, out of the middle class, there's still a tiny percent that really goes to the theater, that supports the theater, that's willing to pay for the theater. Are we able to change their perceptions and their behavior? Yes, I guess. But in this vast scheme of things, I think it would be pretentious to say that we can, because the numbers are so big. For the audience that we talk to, yes, definitely.
But we do every little bit that we can, right? I mean,
Yes, by all means, we do every little bit that we can.
I cannot forget that in your last play, The Kundiman Party, which came out 3 years ago, you had this call to action: sing, remember, resist. I've used them myself many times to end presentations with. Is this fighting spirit to be found also in the Reconciliation Dinner?
A lot of people who came to watch the show, the first run of the show, said that they had gone that in the space of an hour and 30 minutes, because it's only a one-act play, so it's an hour 30 minutes, that it was like a quick review of the Duterte years up to the Marcos years, and then the 1 year after the election. That one of my friends who always watches my plays says he saw his past 6 years just flashing before his eyes, from the Duterte election to the Marcos burial, and then all that string of, there's a whole sequence in the play where the months of the friendship are recounted against EJK, against the dissolution or the Supreme Court, ABS-CBN, and the pandemic. The whole idea of the play was really, when I sat down to write it, it was really to take the audience. I believe, because John, we forget so easily as a people. That's one of the things we we just have such short memories. And I was thinking, if this play could just take us quickly in the space of an hour, 30 minutes through what we've been in the what we've been through in the past 6 years. Now, is it about a call to action? Yes, because if you do look at it, characters in the play do make very strong moral choices.
Mm-hmm.
The the Pinklawan
Mm-hmm.
couple,
Mm-hmm.
if I can just, well, that's how they call each other, Pinklawan and Pulan in the play. I've used
That's
all
right.
the current terms. Um, there's a line in the play that um, Susan
Mm-hmm.
is the Pinklawan housewife, best
That's
friend
right.
of the Pulahan Dina.
Mm-hmm.
And she
The
says,
baker. Mm-hmm.
yes, and she says toward the baker, yes. And she says towards the end of the play, alam mo Dina, kung tungkol lang sa mga kaibigan, kung tungkol lang sa mga acquaintances or kaopisina, pwede eh. But when
Yeah,
it comes to people you love,
that's
people you
right.
care for, you have to make a choice. And I think that's basically the quandary we find ourselves in these days. Um, Another writer said it's really about sweeping aside the politeness and the hypocrisy with which we seem to be carrying on today, and
Mm-hmm.
really staking out the moral choice. Now, if staking out that moral choice in our lives and in our friendships is a form of resistance, by
Mm-hmm.
all means, then let it be a first step.
Um, at the risk of forcing you to choose which of your children you love best, which lines from this play do you think would have the same kind of weight as "Sing, Remember, Resist" from
Ah,
the Convenient Party? Is
okay.
there one? I
I
actually
don't.
noted a few. I don't know which
Thank
one
you.
will.
Yes, do tell me yours, and I'll tell you mine. And thank you for the attention you played this play, John. I'm very flattered.
Oh, it's first of all, it's very well written. Certain characters jump off the page. As I messaged you, it's riveting because we're talking about something that we're living, right? I mean, it's ripped from the headlines and from our lived experiences, but it's also so artfully put together. I mean, it's not just a simple chronological, and then comes this, and then comes that. No, it's obviously well structured, well thought out. Okay, let me give you one of the things that struck me. Dina, the Pulahan
Yes,
uh,
she's yeah.
uh,
She says
lady, she
yes,
says to Susan's toast to respect. She adds an understanding and dear friends.
yes.
Like this is
Because
the new holy trinity of values: respect, understanding,
well,
and dear
um,
friends.
for me, John, kasi when I one of the things I think I enjoy, why I enjoy writing plays and why it takes so much from me, is because I never like to make them stereotypes or
Mhm,
generalizations. I
mhm,
really like, and for me, the character of Dina, which was wonderfully played by Stella Cañete Balucas. In fact, Gibbs Cadiz, in his year-end review, gave her the
mhm,
citation for Best Actress in a one-act play.
mhm.
For me, she's very sincere, and I know
Ye-
pulahans like that who are
yes.
so
Mhm,
sincere about okay, keeping friendships. And just as I know certain pinklawans and dilawans who are very militant and say that they can sacrifice a friendship, Dina for me is a classic, is a modern tragic character. She
mhm,
thinks that she can go, that everything can just be erased by a dinner and by friendships and by politesse and the rights of civility. she
mhm.
she thinks that way, and that's not a bad thing. That's really not a bad thing.
Yeah.
In the When she tells, she notices that the two couples are falling, are floating further apart. But when
Mhm,
she has a bout of, when her breast, at the risk of giving the play away, when she
mhm.
says that her breast cancer has come back, who does she go to? She goes to her oldest friend,
That's right.
Susan. And Susan, who has been gently pulling away from her Pulahan friend, realizes at this time that all the ambiguities, John, of our friendships, all the ambiguities, all the delicate lines, all the fine lines, which politics can erase, but which humanity brings back instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really the push and pull in this
Yeah.
play. Our
Mm-hmm.
moral convictions regarding our political state versus our long ties, versus our humanity, versus things which we don't, which in a perfect world we will not give up, or
And
in a more a mature race we would be able to balance. You need
yeah,
not sacrifice anything. Yes, John.
yeah, and to understand Dina from her own perspective, choosing friends over political choices
Yes,
is not only an act of sincerity. She actually thinks it's a virtuous thing. She
yes,
says,
yes,
uh, in a way, she's like a throwback figure. It's just politics. It's
yes,
just
yes. Right.
yeah. Of
Not
course, it's a
realizing.
very privileged point of view, right? It's
True.
just
Yeah,
politics,
a very privileged point of view. It's just
but
politics. Not
that's what
realizing,
it is. Yeah.
sorry, not realizing how much is already at stake. Yung, ang ganda nga is that's, and one of the things I like also about writing plays, John, is creating an ambiguous character or an ambiguous
Mhm,
situation where there are
mhm,
no judge, where you allow the audience to make their judgment, allow them to
mhm.
make their judgment, allow them to process it. I've never been one for telling them what the audience what to think. You decide in the end. Um, and even with Susan and Fred, with their moral high, with the Pinklawans, with their high moral high horse. Another line which the audience really responded to, and sometimes it was an uncomfortable silence. Sometimes uh, they laughed out loud. Was when Bert, the Pulahan husband, the BBM
Uh-huh.
husband,
Mhm.
tells the audience, "You kasi you talk like Jesuits all the time."
Yes. Yeah, there are a couple of Jesuit references.
Yeah. So, ayun, I like the fact that the characters, I like the fact that Antonio Hilado, the critic, said
Mhm.
that these are very well-rounded people and they're not just stock
Yeah,
characters. Because, I
yeah,
didn't want to just create a Pinklawan couple and a Pulaan couple. They had to have real human roots and they had to have grit and texture as human beings.
yeah, and without giving the rest of the play away, I mean, the situation also is not stereotypical. I mean, there are twists in the end. I mean, there are developments in the end that, well, okay, hark back to classic plays like Chekhov and so on, but
Yeah.
also, help really round out the characters. I really thought it was very well
Thank you.
done.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have
One,
another
yes.
line here. This one is spoken by Norby, the son of the Pinklawan couple.
Yes,
Uh,
Norby, the very militant Pinklawan gay son. He's a
yeah,
flag
yeah.
artist. Yes.
He says, the fight is here, and here I am gonna stay.
Yes. Because
Is
his
that like,
parents,
yeah, one a call to action also?
yes, I guess that is also. And because a lot one of my friends again who came to watch the play says, this that last part of the play is so poignant in a way because you see the old school Pinklawans, the old school Dilawans, as Norby calls his parents,
Mm-hmm.
receding from the fight. You see them
Mm-hmm.
receding from the fight, and
Mm-hmm.
Norby says that's when he says the line,
That's right.
I'm the fight is here, and here I'm going to stay." And it's really a passing of the torch. That line, it's a passing of the torch from one generation onto a more militant, more savvy, more palaban generation, which I hope
Mhm.
which I think this generation is Norby's generation at least.
That's right. Let's discuss Normie for a bit, if you don't like, because
Sure.
he's one of the
Please,
actually he's
you're
the character
watching,
who
discussing your character.
he's the character that really jumps out of the page.
Oh yes, boy, does he
Um,
ever. With
yeah,
especially
he
with
did.
Quintos.
Yeah, it's really something. No, I'm I'm certain that his militancy, his to use a current term, his wokeness, right?
His wokeness.
And also his ability to speak frankly is not directly related to his being a drag
Artist.
performer.
Yeah.
To,
Mm.
to use the
Again.
phrase that they were mocking Bert
Yes.
with, gay, no?
Again.
But at the same time, I'm sure it's. I mean, it's only incidental to his gender orientation. And yet, at the same time, I can't help but think that you made a deliberate choice. Why is the most vivid character in this
Yeah,
play of
more.
seven rows
Thank you.
Norby?
Yes, that was that. Yes, it was a very deliberate choice. So the moment I started writing it, it was only a matter of knowing if Norby was a girl transitioning into being male or a male transitioning to female. And then I realized I didn't know the politics of that, and I said, let's just make him um, uh, gay. Okay,
Mhm,
fine. Why? Thank you, John, for the question. I really, I was part in a small way of the campaign. I had helped stage two of the major rallies, and I
mhm,
really noticed. And in all the rallies, I noticed this very strong presence of the LGBTQIA plus community,
mhm,
and these were young LGBTQIA plus of a certain age. They were young.
mhm,
I don't know what generation they're properly called, but
mhm,
they were young, and they were doing their fair share in the fight for Lenny in ways that they were very comfortable with, in drag acts, in fashion shows, in beauty contests. And I was just saying that this is such a empowering thing for them. It was such and a very visible sight during all the rallies. In fact, I have one of the characters, si Tito Bert,
mhm,
the Pulahan
mhm,
uncle, saying, bakit ba nung campaign ni Lenny, ang dami-daming bakla? And he does that
mhm,
as a way of pushing Norby. But
mhm,
it's a reaction based on what I saw on ground
mhm.
during the campaign. That there were really a lot of young people who were young, a lot of young LGBTQIA who were putting their own freedoms at stake, and who were doing the best that they could. And I said that this is a time. This is historic for us. We've had all the other sectors represented in all the other previous elections, but this is the first time that the young LGBTQIA is really standing up and pushing their presence into the political arena. And I thought that had to be marked. I thought that had to be marked in the play.
Well, I mean, it's the role is just incredible. I mean, he only comes in the second uh, part, but I think he takes over the play.
Yeah, yeah.
um, I have a question about um, the painful or uncomfortable situation. I think many of the members of your audience suffered through some discomfort uh, because you were depicting some very conflicted realities. So, for instance, one of the passages that struck me was when one of the parents says, "How was it possible that I never had a clue that they were BBM or Duterte? I mean, how is it?" So I want to ask you that. How is it, in fact, possible for us to be friends with someone for 20 years
I,
and to be
we're all
shocked with
speaking.
political
We're all
choices?
speaking from experience, and I think
Mhm,
John. The whole thing is that line, and that always got a laugh when the brilliant actress Frances Makil Ignacio,
mhm,
when she says, "No, there's no problem. You can order more cake. I can make more cake." And then the lights change, it turns to the audience, and then she goes, "Hindi, talaga may problema." And the audience always has a big laugh because I think this is a moment of self-recognition also with
mhm,
the audience that, oh my God, yes, that we all have friends na hindi natin alam. And I'm sure the other side, the BBM friend, they always, Ay, super Lenny ka pala. May mga ganun eh. I mean, and it happens all the time in Facebook where friendships are so casual. And I think that's because we
mhm.
all just friend, without knowing what people really believe in. It becomes a test of our friendship, but it does become very uncomfortable. I totally agree, and I'm writing from a lot of my own experiences here. The conflicted, should I stop talking, should we pull away, should we be this. Ga- it's very interesting the way we react to these kinds of revelations in the people we are friends with.
Is it also partly because since 2016, the gravity of our political choices has changed, has become heavier.
Yeah.
It's possible that in 1998, for instance, a friend of yours voted for Erap Estrada.
Yeah.
Another friend voted for Fred Lim, and you voted for Raul Rocco. And
Mm.
after Erap won, it's like, okay.
Ganun, yeah.
But in 2016, after Duterte won, it was like it's different. So that's why I think of Dina as a throwback figure. Like, she belongs to 1998. Politics lang yan. But after 2016, parang it's different. Do you share that sense?
Yes, definitely, definitely, definitely. We have not been as violently ripped to the core as we
Mm-hmm.
have by 2016 and
Mm-hmm.
by this year, by
Mm-hmm.
2022. We have this has been the most polarizing election, two most polarizing elections so far. And there's another line in the play which you noticed also, and which I think is very important. When Fred says the one thing that he hated about the Duterte years is that the simplest, most humane choices became
Yes.
battlefields. Why? I mean, and I guess that's what pulls at us now is because and that's also the reason why we are so polarized, or why Fred and Susan react so violently to finding out that their friends are BBMs, are BBMers. That's really why they react so violently, is because the past 6 years have already shown us so much, and now we're
You know,
still going this way. So
I,
parang
I,
that's where the shock comes from for the character.
I actually set aside. I mean, I actually marked that that passage also. Even the simplest, most human choices, ginawang
You
battlefields.
know,
I
battlefield.
mean, that's. I mean, really, that I think plumbs the depths of the pain that we all feel.
Mm.
But I think at the same time, it is very possible to imagine, in all sincerity, that someone on the other side, BBM or Duterte, would embrace the characterization of our interactions as battlefields. Parang, yeah, it's time. We should show our true selves, etc. But really, this is for me really striking. No? What happens to people who fight these battles? Do these battles and these battlefields change us forever?
Right now, I think one of the things that we really need to do is to start having conversations. Reb
Mhm.
Atadero, the brilliant young
Mhm.
actor who took over,
Mhm.
we had such a crisis just on the first week of the show because Nelsito Gomez, who plays Ellie, was in contact with someone with COVID. So the brilliant
Mhm.
young Reb Atadero came in, memorized the script, was ready to play the next day, and
Wow.
he wrote his Reb in fact opened the play and performed 2 Saturdays, and he two performances on Saturday. Ellie Nelsito came back Saturday evening. He was
Mhm.
negative. One of the things Reb wrote in his journal about doing the play, about the experience of doing the play, is
Mhm.
why do we have such a bleeding hard time talking about politics? Why? And tama nga
Mhm.
naman. That's why I said, tama nga naman. Why don't we just talk? Why does it have to come to sumbatan, sakitan, pikunan? Why does it always have to come to that? Why doesn't it come into, why can't we discuss it with civility and while still keeping, but that's, I guess, John, what makes us us. That's what makes us Filipino, that passionate, that passion, that ability to sacrifice everything. Now, is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? Is that maturity or immaturity? Oh, that's a difficult question to ask. But with regards to what you did ask, that I think we should, what to do now? I think we should start learning to have painful discussions without hurting each other or without putting friendships on the line. Maybe that's what the whole play is really about. um, can we ever reach that state of political maturity where we can talk about our choices without sacrificing, without throwing cakes, without getting picked on? And
Mhm.
if you notice, John, it's so interesting because I was telling the actors when they first read the play, there are two major fights. It's not only the last dinner.
That's
The
right.
first
Mhm.
part of the first fight occurs very early on in the play
That's right.
when Susan comes to Dina's dinner, and she's really feeling out of sorts. And Dina says, "What's wrong?" And then I was just so put off by the burial. What burial? And Dina design turns out to be the M, which immediately locates the play in
That's
time.
right. Hmm.
And suddenly, pack, all of a sudden, the four of them are fighting, and it becomes so ugly. And then Dina just says, "No, I don't want this." And they promise not to do it again. And ganun talaga tayo, John. I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen. It's such a pleasant gathering, biglang one little thing, just one little thing, and pack, all civility flies out the door. I've seen it happen. I think I wrote. I think of all the plays I've written, this is the one where I've actually seen and experienced things. Not a gun waving in the air, no, not that, but the, papunta na doon.
Yeah. Short tempers and short memories.
Right,
Is that a good
right,
combination?
right. It's a
It's a
lethal combination.
survivable combination.
I think I should put that in. It's a lethal combination. Short
um,
memories and short tempers.
the Essentially, there are two kinds of responses. I think that we are capable of, no, when confronting political conflict. No? On the one hand, there's deadma, no?
Yeah.
Or as one of your characters says, the Dutertean deadma
So
syndrome,
solution.
solution
Yeah.
rather, solution. No?
They're the dead
And on the
solution.
other hand, there's confrontation.
Yeah.
And I was really struck by the sudden conversion of one of sudden, but it grew out of his own character, of course, no. His conversion into like a moderator who was getting people, say what you want to say. Now is the
Ellie.
time to. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Ellie. It's Ellie,
Ellie.
the
Ellie for
son-in-law.
me.
So,
Oh,
so between Deadma and confrontation, where does reconciliation lie, do you think?
okay. There's there's another line in the play,
Mm-hmm.
again, which which occurs towards the end of the play, when Dina, her beautiful, perfect reconciliation dinner, smashed to smithereens. Her husband publicly embarrassed her. There's
Mm-hmm.
cake on the floor. Everything's a mess. And she's wiping, and it's a beautifully played scene by Stella Cañete Balucas. She's
Mm-hmm.
wiping the cake off the floor, and she says that it's going to be like this for a long time. Lahat
Mm-hmm.
tayo kanya-kanya na lang. And that's the dangerous part. I feel, John. That's the dangerous
Mm-hmm.
part that we are all facing. That idea of kanya-kanya na lang tayo. And that's what I see happening also right now, is that we're all going, okay, because of Deadma and non-confrontation, and it's Christmas after all, and we all move on, and we all just take care. Ganun tayo. We're all just, oh, sige, let's just go back into our own shells, live life. I've heard it said, let's just coast through the next 6 years, right? We hear that said
Mm-hmm.
too. That idea of all of us going into our own shells, that idea of kanya-kanya, sige, as Dina so beautifully, so resignedly puts it, ganyan naman talaga, ganyan, it's going to be this way in this country for a long time. And she says it with such resignation because it's also her realization, I think. So that's, I guess, what the stage when what we are now, where we are
Mm-hmm.
now. We're all going again into our kanya-kanya na lang mode. Let's survive this. Let's sift through the next 6 years. Looking at Facebook, I've noticed all the very very
Mm-hmm.
militant. Well, I must have been one of them at one point, no. But all my militant friends right now, the tone is so, "I told you so," and that's where also the line comes from. Fred's line, no matter what happens, are you happy about what's happening in this
Yes,
country
that's right. Yeah.
today? And that's what Fred says. No matter, okay, we can talk about this until we're blue in the face, who voted what voted whatever, but are we happy? And then no one answers the question. I think that's where we are. That's one of the most real parts. And watching the play, when I would watch it with the audience, you could sense really a discomfort in the audience because the
Mm-hmm.
silence. Dexter Santos asked Jojo Cayabyab, the actor playing Fred, to hold the silence just a little more till he could not bear it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And you could really feel how thick that silence was in the theater, in
Mm-hmm.
how thick it was in the air, that sense of discomfort. And that's where we are now, John, I think. That sense of whether or not we voted BBM or Lenny, that's where we are now. We're all wait and see, but getting slightly impatient, slightly antsy, because how do you come back to earth after an experience like after so polarizing an experience as the 2022 elections, di ba? So that's where we are now. We're just ostriches, head out of the sand, or head under the sand,
Mm-hmm.
just waiting for things to come by. And it's interesting to see, as Fred also asks, keeps asking in the play, kailan ang mitya? Akala ko ito na yung mitya. He thought that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that Carmally and
Mm-hmm.
Kian was the mitya. It didn't happen. Then he thought that the 2022 elections with the allegations of fraud, he thought
Mm-hmm.
that it was going to happen. Wala nang mitya, wala. We've become too patient. That's why he and this Dina decided to go to Canada and leave Norby. So we're at that stage, and I think it's a false piece for one thing. It's a very false piece, but it's. I think the question is it better than these use these confrontations which lead to, you know, nothing. Anyway, mahirap,
Yeah,
no?
your play raises very difficult questions,
Thank you. Yeah.
and the answers I think we have to live. But I live through. But I do have a question about timing. Is it possible that, in the context of the play, the reconciliation dinner was too soon? Is it possible that we need a little more time to pass?
Okay. Okay. That's a very good question, John. In fact, I've never thought about it until now. But let me tell you one thing. A lot of people, I've been getting a lot of messages, and this is funny.
Mhm.
We're having our own reconciliation dinner, and then they'll show me a picture of their friends on the phone, and that's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, sige,
Yeah.
tal magpapasko. So ang theme ng aming the reconciliation dinner. It's
Yeah.
become a little a little, no, a cultish thing to have
Mhm.
reconciliation dinners. Now, but is it too soon? It's John. It's already what? How many months since May? Yeah, no, I guess not. I guess it's just for me just the right time, because any more we're still, for me okay, John, ganito, I'm
Mhm.
still, of course, though I get the play was written from a lot of experiences from other people and a lot of things I've seen. The main festering point was still what I was going through, what I am going through. That was still the main festering point. Are you sad, Floy? Are you happy? Are you willing to coast along? Are you willing to talk to people who had political differences now, who were
Mhm.
close friends before? Yeah, I think it would be time to just confront that on a personal level. So I guess in that sense, the timing is right, but the timing is right also to ask, are we happy with what's happening now, 6 months
Mhm.
after? That's what it boils down. That's what it all boils down to.
Yeah. Uh, that is the question. Are we happy now?
Yeah,
And maybe there's an uncomfortable silence also in our own conversation,
yeah, yeah.
not just with
Not just with
your
the play.
with your audience. Um, the play is written in such a way that, as you said, it can be ambiguous. I mean, there are no stereotypes. Um, so I am certain that we did not write it for the 31 million or the 15 million, but rather for the 110 million, or the small percentage that watches plays,
Plays,
right?
yeah.
I covered 4 or 5 of the rallies, for instance, and the campaign, and I think that this was pretty new. I mean, very strong perspectives, but it's not leaning to any side. All right, that's my point of view. My question is: have you talked to someone, DDS or BBM, who watched the
Yes.
play and said,
Oh, yeah.
"Actually, I can relate. I mean, I think they were quite fair, etc."
Um, I'll tell you one thing. There was a member of the audience during the preview, during the first
Mm-hmm.
preview. The first preview was Thursday, and we already had a full house attending the preview. There
Mm-hmm.
was this member of the audience who was seated right behind a friend of mine,
Mm-hmm.
Direct Mark Aranal, and Mark
Mm-hmm.
came back to me and said, she was talking all throughout the play, and she was rabidly defending. For example, when the question that was brought up, are you happy with what's masaya ba kayo sa nangyayari sa bansa ngayon?
Mhm.
The member of the audience that was going, 6 months lang naman. Ano ba naman magagawa sa 6 months? Syempre. So, may sense of defense pa yon. Tapos,
All right.
it's,
Okay.
it's also very funny because our crew, our technical crew, the guys who handled the mics and the sound from
Mhm.
sound check, were all BBM.
Mhm.
And during the long speech of Bert, in which he talks about why BBM,
Yeah.
bakit noto yon, and I thought that I wrote that very fairly.
Yeah.
All the technical guys, they were looking at each other and going, oh, talaga, totoo yun, totoo yun. So I said, okay, at least we know we're resonating with the other side. At least I'm glad that we're resonating. That was a hard monologue to write, by the way. The monologue of Bert and his
Yeah.
daughter.
Where he describes unity as a solid concept.
It's a very solid concept. Totoo naman
Solid.
eh. It's a solid concept. As opposed to the beautiful, poetic, mas radical ang magmahal. You have unity. And you kind of admire the way the other side has just simplified and, bobified everything. You know what I mean? It really has become a class struggle between the educated and what they aspire for,
Mhm.
and the greater mass and that solid concept that Bert describes that everyone can ride on. Okay, have I talked to anybody? Before the play? I didn't need to talk to anybody because I have my
Yeah.
whole spectrum of friends runs from
Sure.
BBM and DDS. I have plenty of friends who are like that.
Mhm.
Um, but how did they react to it? Ayun, that what the people in the crew who are very crucial to the way a play runs. In
Mhm.
fact, I would go up to them and say, "Boss, huwag niyong ibaba ang mic ng mga pinklawan ha, baka tinataas niyo lang sa pag mga details." And of course, we would all have a good laugh about that. We would all have a good laugh about that. It really became a running joke that if anything went wrong in the play, if anything went wrong in the sound, kasi BBM yung mga tech natin eh. We would all go like that. But of course at the end we were all professional.
There's a phrase that Norby, the militant gay, uses, no? To contrast civil society. Sabi niya, luma na yung civil society, kailangan tactless society.
And that's
Uh,
that's echoed all over Facebook now by young
yeah,
people who
yeah.
are saying that that you need to call a spade a spade. You need to go out there beyond FB. That you need to. Ang daming ganyan. And I think that is really the direction that we should be going in. The,
But
the
this is quite different from, or is it? Is it different from Lenny's idea of radical love?
if you look at the character of Norby in his first entrance, when he talks about November, December last year, which was just
Mhm.
a year ago, he was so in love with that idea. In love
Yeah,
with, sabi nga niya, yung mas radical ang magmahal, yun ang naging mantra ko, he says.
that's right.
and
That's right.
and suddenly the whole this yung itong pardon my French, itong buwaka na beach na bansang ito kaya pala ang magmahal, magkaya, justice was fair, truth
Mhm.
was fair, acceptance was real.
Yeah.
And maybe in the past year, Norby did have that transformation. Norby did have that transformation. Na, okay, we've tried radical love, we've tried that. It's time to be something else now. It's time to try a different war tactic now. And he does that by being totally confrontational about everything. He's so confrontational, Norby. And of course in his own sweet and charming way. He's very confrontational. But yun, he has his journey. And I think that's the journey most young people are taking, will take, are undergoing right now. From radical love, moving into the sphere of more militant, more aggressive, more vocal dissent.
In Rizal terms, from Noli to Philly na tayo.
Yes, from Noli to Philly. Exacto.
Noli.
From Ibarra to Simon. Of course, not as cruel naman as Simon.
That's
Although
right.
although if you look at Ellie's speech, again, there's that very controversial part in Ellie's speech where sometimes the audience would just keep quiet. But there was 2 nights, I think, where they started applauding.
Mhm.
What we were too kind in 1986. Ellie says.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
problem was you were too kind in 1986. Then he points to the Ipatiev house, the Bolshoi
Yeah.
solution, the Bolshevik solution, and it kind of chills the audience into thinking that. But there was a night when the audience just went rapidly into applause for that thought. And I knew that that night, ito yung mga Norby. Ito yung mga
Mhm.
they're now ready to push it on into another level. It's actually
I,
very
I am reminded of the columns of Teddy Benigno, I think in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was the theme already of his columns. Um, we needed to, we should have made harder and harsher decisions.
yes, right.
Just even just Cory Aquino's failure to root out the name Marcos from state universities, highways, and so on. I think that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. In hindsight,
On
again,
hindsight, that's right. Yeah.
as Ellie says, the problem we're too kind.
I didn't realize we're going on 40 minutes and
Oh wow, sorry.
we're running long. This is really a wonderful conversation that we're having. I really enjoy the play. I understand that you're looking at a new staging weekend of January 2021. I don't know if that's
Yes, we're still working it out, but
mhm.
we'll put it out there.
That-
Meanwhile, thank you,
yeah,
John, for giving me this platform.
yeah.
To all those who didn't see the play or would like to see the reconciliation dinner again with the same cast, there are plans afoot now to run it again January weekend of January 21 and the following weekend. It will be
Oh,
announced.
okay, great. Two
Thank you.
weekends. That's right. Something to look forward to. Maybe I can just ask one last question, Floy.
Sure.
Um, what do you think of this? What do you say to someone whose response to the reconciliation dinner is, okay, we're not talking about narratives anymore. Immediately after the elections, it's like, oh, we should have more powerful narratives. We should have more compelling stories that will help shape society. I think the reconciliation dinner is more about life inside those narratives. It's like this is we are being shaped by these greater forces, and we are
Yeah.
living through that. What do you say to someone who would respond to your play that way?
I- John, I've never really written about all my plays. I've never really. My biggest fear when writing a play is that it becomes didactic. I've
Mhm,
always
mhm.
the theater is very human, and I'm not going to say
Right.
mag-lecture na lang ako kung ganun. I'll attend the lecture. I'll watch
Mhm,
a lecture if I want the greatest course of history. But if I want to see, and that's my biggest challenge as a playwright, is how does it affect us as human beings? How is
mhm,
it a human situation instead of a history lesson or a narrative? Kasi yung mga ganyan, ang daming magagaling dyan. There are so many narratives, so many great philosophers, so many historians we can read, so many pundits who can analyze these forms. But how is it affecting us as Filipinos and as people? That's always my greatest concern when I write a play. In Kundiman Party, it was the same thing. How are all these women, how are all these different women
mhm,
affected by the specter of authoritarianism? And how is art a way of combating that? And even in previous plays, Angry Christ talked about the dilemma of the artist, but it didn't talk about it in higher terms. It always talked about it. I always like to talk about human beings at specific points in time. I'm not interested in the history or the sweeping
mhm,
generalization. At least as a theater person, as a playwright,
mhm.
I'm not interested in that. That's for the historians. That's where we all learn from the historians. How is it affecting us as people and as Filipinos and the choices that we make? That's what's important for me.
Let me just end by bringing in another human being, the seventh character we had not mentioned, Mika, who
Yes,
plays a very interesting role and also has one of the funniest lines
which
uh,
is
in the end. When she uses the catchphrase of Norby back at him.
yeah,
Um, Interesting. She plays the daughter of the Pulahans. She's Pulahan herself, but us to make a decision, down the road. Anyway, I just wanted to recognize also that.
Yeah. No,
particular role.
I'm sorry. I'll take. Just give me another 30 seconds. Mika's very
Sure.
interesting because a lot of people have asked me. So, if why is Ellie? Why can't Ellie come out and say that he was for Lenny? I mean, what is it? Love? I said, yeah. Obviously, they love each other. And my cousin Noel De Jesus, the writer, said, "Was
Mhm.
the sex great?" I said, "I suppose it was. I suppose it really was. The sex must have been great for Nika and for Ellie because Ellie will willingly. But then again, that's so Pinoy. Hindi ko na lang sasabihin na Lenny
Yeah.
ako. Don't rock the boat. He said, just don't rock the
Well,
boat.
it's either that or the secret to reconciliation is great sex.
Yes, that's true too. That's true too. That's true too. Thank you, John.
Uh, we've uh, we've taken up so much of your time
No,
to
no, no.
direct
It's been a
Loiki.
pleasure.
Thank you very much. This was an illuminating and for me personally a revelatory discussion. Your art is a unique defense of the public square. You criticize it at the very time you celebrate it. Again, many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for this platform. Thank you for the time. And thank you to the guys.
That's it for us tonight. The next step for engaged citizens is always to take a more active part in rebuilding our democracy. See you in the public square. This is John Nery. Thank you and good night.